Avoidant partners are one of the most confusing experiences that you can have in dating and relationships. One minute they're really affectionate and deeply connected, and then you start to notice them pulling away, and often it's quite subtle at first, and then it gets more noticeable over time. You feel a shift in their tone, their texting patterns, how present they are in the connection. And one of the most frustrating things about this is avoidant patterns never seem to make sense on the surface. It can feel really personal, their behavior can feel really cold, and it can actually feel like rejection. But here's the biggest truth. Avoidant behavior actually has very little to do with you and everything to do with that person's nervous system. Today I'm going to walk you through exactly what's happening in an avoidant person's mind, both emotionally, psychologically and neurologically, and exactly which way to respond best whilst protecting your own energy but being able to sustain the connection at the same time too. And no, I am not going to tell you to just give them space or to stop being so needy, because we hear that advice banded around everywhere when it comes to avoidant attachment patterns. This is real attachment psychology, emotion regulation, and relationship strategy. And whether you're in the situation where you're dating an avoidant right now, you're getting over an avoidant ex, or you find yourself stuck in the same avoidant patterns time and time again, by the end of this video, you're going to understand avoidance at a level most people never do. So let's start with the foundation. Avoidant attachment has nothing to do with not wanting love. Avoidants actually want love as much as anyone else. Deep down, they crave that intimacy and connection and that closeness with the person that they admire and that they want to be with. But their early environment has often taught them something completely different to what you've been taught. Where anxious attachment learns closeness isn't stable, I must hold on to it, I need to chase, I need to prove myself in order to sustain this connection. Avoidant attachment learns closeness isn't safe, I need to manage this, I need to be on my own to understand it, I need to work through this myself. Avoidants have learned from a very young age that emotional closeness can often come with chaos, pressure, overwhelm, criticism, or just generally expectations that they could never meet. Maybe their caregivers were loving but quite often intrusive. Or maybe their feelings were just dismissed and minimized. Maybe independence was praised and vulnerability was often uncomfortable. Or maybe emotional need was met with withdrawal. So the avoidance survival strategy then became something like stay close enough to feel connected but far away enough to still feel like you're in control. And this is why avoidants can often send out such mixed signals in a relationship. This is why they warm up and then cool down. This is why their emotional presence remains so inconsistent. It's not because they're game playing, it's because intimacy activates their nervous system a little bit differently. And here's what no one tells you. Avoidants don't avoid you, they avoid the feelings that closeness brings up inside of them. When intimacy deepens, their body sends this message. This is too much, you're losing control, pull back. And so they do. And if you're anxiously attached yourself, this creates this perfect storm. When an avoidant pulls away, your fear activates. And so you move closer to try to stabilize that bond, which then makes the avoidant feel pressured, so they pull away even more, which triggers your anxiety, so you pursue even harder, which then triggers their overwhelm, so they distance further. This isn't love at all. This is two nervous systems trying to manage fear together. Understanding this dynamic is actually the difference between you taking things personally and you taking strategic, conscious action to be able to manage the situation in a healthy way. So let's go a little bit deeper into what avoidant behavior actually looks like. Avoidants tend to value independence highly, and not because they're naturally solitary at all, but because independence feels emotionally safer than connection. They can often compartmentalize relationships. One box for love, one for stress, one for inner world, one for work, and they can be incredibly affectionate in moments. But when the relationship starts to deepen or expectations rise, they'll instinctively start to create that space. This might look a little bit like slower texting, less enthusiasm, fewer plans, or just spending more time absorbed in work and hobbies. Not because their interest in the connection has faded, but because their emotional system has reached this threshold. And avoidants don't actually realize that they're doing this. It's not conscious manipulation, it's actually a form of protection. Their internal dialogue, so what's happening in these moments, can often sound a little bit like, I'm getting too close, this feels risky, I need to breathe, I need space, I don't want disappointment, I just don't know how to do this. But because avoidants struggle to express that emotional discomfort, their behavior is what becomes the communication. And if you're anxiously attached, you'll read that behavior through your own lens. He's losing interest, he's pulling away, I did something wrong, or maybe if I give more, he'll come back. But this is where everything can actually collapse, because the more reassurance you try to seek, the more the avoidant actually feels overwhelmed with the connection too. Avoidants regulate through distance, and anxious partners regulate through closeness. Opposite strategies, opposite survival patterns. And if you don't understand this, you'll internalize everything as rejection. So let's talk about a key truth that you need to know if you want to navigate this without actually losing yourself in the process. Avoidants don't pull away because you're too much. They pull away because their emotional capacity is just too little. Most avoidants have never learned how to handle vulnerability, emotional safety, or being depended on. So when the relationship reaches a point where emotional expectations grow, deeper communication, future planning, consistency, their nervous system will naturally interpret this as pressure. In response, they'll retreat, and if you personalize this, you're going to spiral. But if you understand it, you can respond from that grounded clarity. The second truth you need to know is this. Avoidants feel more comfortable with people who don't rely on them emotionally. And this is why avoidants often date anxiously attached partners at first. The chemistry's strong, the connection feels really exciting, but the emotional expectations quickly become too much for their capacity. Avoidants will often describe closeness as heavy or intense or overwhelming, even when nothing's actually wrong. What they're actually describing is internal activation, a physical and emotional tightening around intimacy. And here's the part most people never even realize. Avoidants actually aren't avoiding love. They're avoiding vulnerability, because vulnerability is where they felt pain. And that brings us to the most important part in this video: how to deal with an avoidant without losing your mind and abandoning yourself in the process. There are 5 core principles that will change everything if you're navigating this dynamic. The first principle is this: stop over pursuing. And this is often the hardest part for anxiously attached individuals. When you're sensing distance, your instinct is to fix, close the gap, reconnect. But trying to pursue an avoidant who's already feeling overwhelmed can actually intensify that withdrawal. It reinforces their belief that closeness equates to pressure. When an avoidant creates space, it's important that you do the same. Not as punishment in any way, but as regulation. When you start to back off from the avoidant who's craving that space, this communicates the idea that I'm okay, I'm grounded, I'm not here to smother you. And that healthy energy that you portray actually feels quite relieving to the avoidant as well. Chasing can feel like a threat to the avoidant who needs the space. The second principle: don't fill that silence with stories. Avoidants often need a bit of processing time. They may pull back, become quieter, or just start to focus on different areas in their life. The worst thing that you can do is interpret this automatically as rejection. Avoidants often need time to reset their emotional system, and having that space is part of doing that. Inside your mind, you're going to feel the urge to fill all that gap with assumptions. He's losing interest, I'm not enough, it's over. But those assumptions are coming from your own attachment style rather than actual truth. Your job is to replace assumption with observation. Has his behavior changed dramatically? Are his actions consistent over time? Does he show up again after he's had a reset, after he's had that space? Does he meet your needs when you're expressing them calmly? Look at patterns in behavior rather than panic. Third principle: communicate your needs without emotional intensity. Avoidants will very easily shut down when they feel confronted. They don't respond well to emotional overwhelm, pressure, or urgency, but they can respond well to calm clarity. Instead of saying something like, "You don't text anymore, you're making me feel anxious, you don't care about me anymore," try something like this: "When communication slows down, I feel a little bit unsettled. I don't need constant messaging, but I'd really appreciate just some consistency. What level of communication feels comfortable to you right now?" This approach actually does 3 things. It shows self-awareness, reduces pressure, and creates that sense of emotional safety between the both of you. Avoidants can actually surprise themselves sometimes by responding quite positively when that communication is grounded, it's direct, and it's non-accusatory. The 4th principle is to build your emotional safety independent of their behavior. This can be the part that changes everything. If you're relying on an avoidant's closeness to regulate your own anxiety, the connection can often become very unstable. You need emotional tools that steady you regardless of where they're at. This can look a little bit like grounding practices when you're triggered, trying to separate fact from fear, giving yourself that reassurance that you're craving from that person, reminding yourself that distance doesn't always equate to danger, and anchoring into your own routine, your friendships, and your identity. Avoidant behavior can very easily lose its emotional power when your own self-worth no longer depends on it. And the 5th principle: know when their avoidant behavior crosses misalignment and not just difference. There's healthy avoidance, the kind rooted in nervous system overwhelm and emotional capacity, and then there's unhealthy avoidance, the kind rooted in irresponsibility, emotional immaturity, and lack of effort. Healthy avoidance looks a little bit like needing space but returning from that space, slower emotional processing, discomfort with that vulnerability but still trying anyway, and pulling back but not completely disappearing from the connection. Unhealthy avoidance looks more like going days or weeks without any form of communication, or breadcrumbing or inconsistency without accountability, avoidance used as punishment, refusing emotional conversations entirely, and just seeing no progression whatsoever over time. The moment you recognize that someone's avoidance isn't a temporary response but a permanent limitation, your job is not to fix it. Your job is to choose yourself. Your attachment style can heal, your nervous system can re-regulate, and your emotional world can transform, but only with a partner who's willing to meet you halfway. Avoidance is not your responsibility to solve. Your healing is. And here's where the power begins. Avoidants don't trigger you because they're special. They trigger you because they awaken your oldest wound, the fear of losing love. When you heal that part of you, avoidants become way less magnetic. Their distance stops activating you. Their withdrawal or space stops defining your worth. You stop asking yourself, how do I keep this person? And instead, you start asking, is this actually emotionally safe for me to enter into? That shift is everything. And this is exactly the work that we do inside my Love Mastery program. If you're someone who feels constantly overwhelmed by avoidant partners, you're always overthinking, or it feels like your emotional world is always reacting rather than choosing, my Love Mastery teaches you how to regulate your nervous system, rewire attachment patterns, and stop emotionally incompatible men having power over your self-worth. You learn exactly how to become secure from the inside out, so you're no longer at the mercy of someone else's emotional availability. If you want to experience a relationship where you feel safe, chosen, and emotionally grounded, without chasing, without overthinking, without losing yourself in the process, the link to my Love Mastery is in the description below. Avoidants aren't your destiny. Your healing is. And when you do the work, you stop chasing romantic partners who trigger those old wounds. And you start attracting romantic partners who regulate your nervous system rather than activating it. That's what secure love feels like, and that is what you deserve. If you want more psychology-backed videos like this, make sure you're hitting subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.